afternoon, and welcome into the latest edition of the Hook'em Hoops podcast. And take a look at this. The three of us are back in the same three-box setting for the first time in about a month. The Cowboys season is over. K-State football season is over. Texas football season is over. Texas basketball is the focus right now. They are 0-3 in conference play. There is so much to talk about. But first, how is everybody doing?
Doing great. Doing great. We're finally in the off season here in the NFL, so things get a little bit easier. It's 99% my fault while it's only been the two people on these podcasts for a majority of the time, so I apologize for that, but happy to be back with you guys talking some Texas hoops.
College football in Austin is officially over, so now we can focus on the real sport, college basketball. Happy to be back in Austin. The month in LA was a nice break, but glad to be next to the Moody Center again.
So let's get into some hoops talk. Texas 0-3 in conference play. Face three of the four best teams in the conference outside of Alabama, three of the five outside of Alabama and Florida. They'll face Florida this upcoming weekend. Need a win on Wednesday. They face Oklahoma tonight. It's really biggest game of the year for Texas. You can't start 0-4 in conference play, especially with the road game against Florida coming up on Saturday. But I want to ask you guys first with the triad of games that they started conference play with. Texas A&M with Wade Taylor, important to note, Auburn and Tennessee. What are our initial takeaways after seeing Texas against the true top tier of the SEC?
Well, I think the the last two games show you that they've at least gotten better. That Auburn game was just it wasn't pretty, but they kept it close at the end. I like what I saw in the second half there to make things interesting at the very least. And then Tennessee, they hung around in that game and they had a lead in that game for a good amount of time. So I think that they've improved offensively in some of the half court sets that we're seeing. But the issue with this offense still is I think that they don't take great shots sometimes. And I think part of that is Trey Johnson sometimes just has a green light in any situation. And that's great. But you've got to be smart with how you use that green light, and you've got to take good shots. Sometimes he takes contested shots that I'm just like, man, that just wastes a possession for Texas. And maybe you can reset and try to get an open look if you can if you just pass the ball one or two more times. But to be able to hang around within five of Auburn, within four of Tennessee, we've talked about it on the show multiple times. Not a moral victory guy, but that shows growth to me compared to a 20-point loss on the road to Texas A&M. It helps both those games were at home too in the Moody Center, but Ronnie Terry and this staff have got to find a way to get over that edge and to get into the win column. And as much as it is a must win for Texas against Oklahoma, it's the same thing for the Sooners. They're 0-3 in conference play too after a really hot start.
Yeah, you're on the money, Tommy, with the whole shot selection. I think it's a big part of this team because I feel like in A&M, against A&M, I thought Texas played really well in the first half and completely fell apart in the second half. And that kind of made me think, well, this team is nowhere close to ready. It's because of the non-conference schedule. But then you go to see Auburn and Tennessee in the Moody Center, and this team is playing well. I tweeted out, I think Texas has played 85% to their true potential. I think against Auburn and against Tennessee, they were very close. I went to the Tennessee game the first day I was back in Austin. It was the best individual performance I have ever seen in person. The shots Trey Johnson, I'm not even joking. The shots Trey Johnson was making, and I don't know if you guys watched the game, you see the stands. There's nobody there, and when Trey was making those shots, Moody was loud, and it was really loud for a stadium where the student section was probably 35% full, and it was what Trey Johnson could do, and it's partially frustrating because you're aware of what he can do, and then you watch the game, and Trey does not touch the ball every possession, which is incredibly frustrating because I'm not saying don't take 50 shots a game, don't take 40 shots a game, but Trey Johnson should be dictating this offense. I don't care that he's a shooting guard. I don't care that he's 6'7". He's athletic. He can move, and he's a threat always, and people collapse on him. He should be driving and kicking. He should be trying pump faking on the perimeter, and sometimes he just sits in the corner. It can be incredibly frustrating because look, there's a lot of players that can make plays on this team. Jordan Pope, Tremont Mark, Arthur Kaluma. Those are guys those are 3-level scorers, but they're not NBA players. And Trey Johnson is an NBA player. And for him to be going against, this Tennessee team is good, but they don't have anyone close to a Trey Johnson kind of player, and for it's a whole other level of basketball that I feel like Texas isn't using all the time, which is why I say it's 85% to the potential. Because if Trey Johnson is touching the ball whenever he's out on the court, I think he got 37 minutes against Tennessee, something crazy like that. Um, who knows? He was a big reason why the game was so close.
To the Trey Johnson point, I think he played fantastic against Tennessee. I think that he tapped back into a lot of what we saw in the non-conference, maybe the confidence that he had lost against some of these big teams. He got back and he looked fantastic, put the team on his back at times. I think it might take another performance like that or two for Trey to get the trust of his teammates back after some of the poor shot selection. I mean, we've seen guys like Arthur Kaluma and Tremont Mark sort of remodel their game, take smarter shots within the offense. Those were things we didn't expect going into the year. And so kind of waiting for Trey Johnson to come along on that, even though he is your most talented player. To Zach's point, he is really the only NBA player they have on the team. I can see the psychological side of him not touching the ball, why maybe his teammates aren't giving him the rock on every single possession. I can see that. To the Jordan Pope point, you didn't say much about him other than mention his name, but he deserves his flowers. He has been fantastic. He is fully into form, double-digit points in 7 straight games. That includes his 42-point outburst. My issue with Jordan Pope is we need to stop classifying him as a point guard. He's not a point guard. Those 7 games where he scored double-digit points, he had more than 2 assists in just one of those games. So Texas is still looking for their key facilitator in the starting lineup. Julian Larry does a fine job off the bench. Kendall Weaver, when he's healthy, that's another thing we need to talk about. Kendall Weaver, it's looking like he's going to be out possibly through the end of conference play. So how does Texas replace that intensity on defense, those hustle plays, all the things that kind of fill the gap? I think that Jordan Pope is a guy who has earned a bigger role. I would like to see him continue to take those big shots. He has been fantastic at times from 3. I mean, in his 42-point game, yes, it was against New Orleans, he hit 8 threes. He shot 8 of 12 from deep. I see a lot of Marcus Carr and Jordan Pope. And so I would like to see him continue to get as much usage as possible. And then lastly, Arthur Kaluma, I officially need to apologize for being wrong about because he has been fantastic this year with the exception of the Tennessee game where he didn't score. I thought that was confusing, even though Tennessee has some really, really good defensive bigs, 2 of the best defensive bigs in the country. Arthur Kaluma has changed his game. I mean, he doesn't act like a point guard anymore, even though he can defend positions 1 through 5 when asked to on the other side of the court. He's a much smarter shot taker. He still has his moments, but you can afford it when he's giving you 15 and 8 a night, like he really is at this rate. And so, in order for Texas to get over the hump and beat teams like Tennessee, you need Arthur Kaluma to score 10 points. If Arthur Kaluma scored 8 points, they would have won. So that's kind of my takeaways from these last few games. But really, from an 0-3 start, a lot of good. A lot of good. And the last thing I want to say before I send it to Tommy here, Texas did something against Tennessee that might have saved the season. And that is they didn't foul down 4 with about 10 seconds left. And a lot of people wondered why that was. I realized immediately the reason why they didn't foul was because they're trying to help their net ranking, they're trying to help their analytics, and it worked. Their KenPom ranking jumped 5 spots from the 4-point loss to Tennessee. So if Texas ends up being one of the last 2, 3, even 4 teams in the tournament field come March, I will be looking at that decision from Rodney Terry not to foul down 4 in a game that wasn't essentially over as something that actually saved the season.
Yeah, I can see that, and that's a good point. My counterpoint to that is, well, if Texas wants to get in the tournament, they're going to have to win some games at some point. I mean, good God, when you look at the schedule, coming into this stretch, and Oklahoma now unranked, but it's not like they're a bad basketball team. You wondered, okay, when is Texas going to find their first win? When are they going to find their first conference win? Is it Oklahoma? If not, okay. Are they going to do it on the road at Florida? Are they going to do it at home against Missouri? Would Missouri be the first win? So are you telling me if it's Missouri, they're going to wait until January 21st to find their first conference victory? I mean, that's just brutal. And that doesn't look great. And I know it's kind of mirroring last season where at the early goings of the year, it didn't look like Texas would Texas had a tournament resume, especially during the start of Big 12 conference play. I know Jason and I talked about that a lot, and things kind of got better as they went along. So maybe that's a similar situation here, but at the same time, it's still kind of a murderer's row stretch for Texas because after Missouri, they've got to host A&M, and then they go on the road and play a guy that we may or may not be familiar with in Chris Beard. So that's a tough stretch, and Texas has got to get some wins out of this, and they've got to start at least they've got to get a resume win. Texas doesn't have a resume win right now. They don't. And so I know on the latest bracketology from Lenardi, they're out, right? I think they're the fifth team out right now. So you got to start clawing your way back into this thing. It's not something that you can just continue to let slip. Net rankings and Ken Palm, that's all great, but you've got to win some games.
Yeah, the bad thing is Texas hasn't won a game inside of the top 80 of Ken Palm rankings. The good news is there's plenty of opportunity for that. And you're talking about the entire schedule, Tommy. I mean, there's so much opportunity, but you have to play a game that's gonna give you the momentum for more wins. And that's what this Oklahoma game is to me. Because yeah, I mean they're gonna have a good chance against Vanderbilt and some of the bottom four teams, but the SEC is loaded and some of the teams up top are practically unbeatable for Texas. I mean, Trey Johnson had the game of the season, I would say, against Tennessee, and they still lost. Like those teams are considered, I would consider unbeatable for Texas. So a game like Oklahoma, who's also 0-3, who's also looking to prove themselves in the SEC. These are two Big 12 teams that are playing in the SEC for the first time against each other. And this is going to open the floodgates for one of these teams. I think Oklahoma started off, 13-0, one of the last undefeated teams in college basketball. Texas also 0-3 in the SEC. This game, whoever wins this game is going to have the momentum for the rest of the season where they're saying, we can do this. We beat a legitimate team. Oklahoma, to me, is still a legitimate team. So what I'm trying to say is this is the biggest game of the season right now. It wasn't Auburn, it wasn't A&M. It's right now because this is the opportunity for Texas to get the momentum back in the locker room, for Ronnie Terry to say, we got this, we have our guys, for it to be an away game in Oklahoma. I mean, if a win for Texas right here would not only prove that they are a tournament team, but also they can compete in the SEC. I'm not saying finish top three, but I'm saying compete, win those 7 games, win those 3 away games we were talking about with Clark Kellogg, win 4 or 5 home games. This is going to tell us if they can do it.
Yeah, getting into the game a little bit, this would be Texas's first quad one win. Zach, you made a number of really good points. I'd say the first one is that this is one of those games that can open up the floodgates for other wins. Like, this is a Big 12 game hiding in plain sight for Texas. Like, this is an opponent that they're familiar with, and it's a team that I think Texas actually matches up pretty well against. It's an Oklahoma team that I would say is still figuring out some of the roles secondarily. You know who the top dogs are. Jeremiah Fears has been one of the best freshmen in the country. I'm really, really excited to watch a matchup between he and Trey Johnson. Kobe Elvis, Duke Miles, the 2 guard transfers from the mid-major ranks. They've been good at times. And then Jalen Moore has become a completely different player than what he was in the Big 12. Really, 17-6 this year is what he's averaging. I can't imagine that based on what I saw from him in the Big 12. But watching him this year, he has been fantastic. So Texas is going to have to share the rock. I would like to see 15 plus points from Trey Johnson, Arthur Kaluma, Jordan Pope, because in order to win in the SEC, even though I just called this a Big 12 game, not to diss a Big 12, but you need your big dogs to show up every single night. Like, their best style of play needs to be the style of play that they're exhibiting every single night. And that means Jordan Pope is filling it up, especially from deep. Trey Johnson is getting good shots, taking good shots, making open shots. He's your leading scorer. And then Arthur Kaluma doing a lot of the scoring down low. From a size standpoint, this is a good matchup for Texas. I don't see any issues defensively at surface level. I would just like to see Arthur Kaluma kind of get his legs back under him after not scoring on Saturday. I think that what he means to this team can't be understated. And I think that him showing up repeatedly on both ends of the court is imperative for Texas winning, especially on the road in the SEC. Zach, when we talked with Clark Kellogg, He said this league and who makes the tournament out of it will be defined by who wins road games. And this is just a prime opportunity for Texas tonight in Norman.
Yeah, it's a prime opportunity, and I think that they might be catching Oklahoma at a good time. We mentioned the three straight losses. The first one came to Alabama. I mean, they just got waxed, is putting it politely, in that first game. They lost to A&M at home by 2, and then a 10-point loss to Georgia, which, I mean, dogs. Since when have they been good at basketball? And that just tells you how deep this conference is. Asia Noel for Texas Target. That's all I'll say. But this in that Georgia game, you meant Jason mentioned Jeremiah Fears, obviously one of the best freshmen in the country. He had 2 points. 2 points. So my style for Texas this game, or my ask for Texas this game, is if you take Jeremiah Fears out of this game, I think you've got a really good shot. I'm going to garner that he's going to score more than 2 points against Texas, but if he's limited, then I think that increases Texas's chance of winning this game dramatically. It's going to be a raucous environment. It's a late tip-off. I know we were talking about that before on the show, but it's Norman. They hate Texas, so it's going to be loud. But a really, really good chance to get a first win. And I do agree with the thought that this could lead to kind of an avalanche for either team, really, in terms of getting their season back on track with some wins adding up after this.
Look, you guys know I'm a big Ken Palm guy, and I don't really know what this means, but Ken Palm has their home court arena, the Lloyd Noble Center, as the seventh best in college basketball as far as a home court advantage goes. Not the seventh largest, but it's the seventh
Wow.
best. So I don't know what that means of how loud it gets or how that momentum shifts it. I don't know what kind of data he uses for it, but he says, according to Ken Palm, this is a top 10 place, hard to play kind of area. So 9 p.m. Oklahoma, they haven't been watching football in ages. So feels like years, actually 1 year. So it's a big game. And to me, Porter Moser, when I think of him as a coach, he kind of runs with small ball and he loves to pick and roll and he wants to drag out center. So to me, the X factor in this game is Caden Shedrick, because we know one of Shedrick's weaknesses is guarding the pick and roll and how slow he can be coming back into the paint and guarding the roller. So, Oklahoma is not the best 3-point shooting, but not the best 3-point shooting team. They're not the best 2-point shooting team, but they're good at guarding the three. And they're good. And so what I'm trying to say, I think the key to win this game is how Caden Shedrick plays defense, because he's hard to guard on offense. He's a big body. I think he's gonna be the biggest player on the court tonight. So I'm very interested to see how he plays. Obviously Trey has to have a great game, but how does Caden guard the pick and roll? Does Ziriko Onyema have to come in at all? What kind of role does he play? How is foul trouble going to play? And how does Jeremiah Fears play? A lot of questions to be answered, but like you said, Tommy, I mean, both teams are on a downswing, and if Texas were to play Oklahoma at any time of the year, I would take right now.
Right.
Texas is on a really hot streak against Oklahoma. I mean, they have had the Sooners number in men's basketball. They've won the last 7 matchups. They've won 8 of the last 9, starting with that Matt Coleman buzzer beater in 2020, right before COVID. And they haven't lost in Norman since 2019. So they haven't lost in Norman in almost 6 years. It was February of 2019, the last time Texas lost in Norman. I mean, this is a prime opportunity to pick up the biggest win of the year, your first quad 1 win. Not that it matters in the middle of January, but a win that right now would put you across the NCAA tournament bubble. And that's only important to me because this was the same time last year where Texas got off to the rough start in Big 12 play. They were actually completely out of the NCAA tournament picture because they didn't really have any resume wins, and they were 1-3 in Big 12 play, and everyone was kind of like, what the heck? And then they figured it out. Tyrese Hunter hit that buzzer beater against Baylor. They went on a nice run, won back-to-back ranked games, never looked back. They were in the tournament field from middle to end of January on, and almost made the Sweet 16. So I'm looking at a similar kind of ascension here. Obviously, the Florida game coming up this weekend is very tough. I think that's a team that Texas matches up really poorly against. We'll get to that game on a future episode, but As for this weekend's game, a prime opportunity. I think that this could be another thriller. We've had some fantastic games between Texas and Oklahoma the last 5 years. I mean, let's see how many. 4 of these 7 games that Texas has won in a row against Oklahoma were decided by 1 score. And so that could easily happen tonight in Norman. But Texas is going to need their big dogs to play the best. And I'll start our predictions block by saying that that's what's going to happen. I've got Arthur Kaluma for a bounce back game. I think Jordan Pope is going to continue his ascension. He'll have his 8th straight game scoring in double figures. And staying with the theme of 8s, Texas picks up their 8th straight win against Oklahoma. I'll say that they win by 5.
Go ahead, Zach.
Look, I think Kendall Weaver not playing is not a blessing in disguise, but it definitely changes the thing because it changes how Texas plays. You get a lot more offense and you get a lot less defense basically without Kendall Weaver. So that opens the door for Tremont Mark and Jordan Pope to score in higher figures. I think Tremont Mark and Jordan Pope both get in double figures against Oklahoma. I think Texas wins, let's say 85-84.
Ooh.
Yeah, good picks, boys. And I think we're going to make it 3 in a row here. I like Texas in this game. Uh, yeah, shocker. I just think that this team is kind of due for a win like this. They've knocked on the door the last 2 weeks against 2 really good teams after getting blown out by Texas A&M. I think that there's a sense of urgency for this team. I think there's a sense of urgency for Rodney Terry with things starting to maybe heat up under his seat. And this is a team that needs a win and it needs wins to avalanche together. So I've got Texas in a close one. I'll go Texas by 3.
So I've got Texas by 5. Tommy's got Texas by 3. Zach's got Texas by 1. The 3 of us have the horns all around. We will get together again soon to recap this game, preview the next one. Hopefully a win to talk about. Please, Texas needs it. We don't want this SEC, conference play slate to go to die really in the middle of January. So many fun games coming up. So Texas needs a win. It's a prime opportunity in Norman. It's a place that they play well, and we're hoping that they do just